And I think that's where it sometimes gets a little controversial, is a lot of people just aren't aware of the nuance and the appropriateness of how to do it. And also, you can't judge from a single photo or a little tiny video clip because you're not seeing the context.
Hi, I'm Laura from Doggy U, and today we're lucky enough to be here at Bold Lead Design in Aurora, Colorado with Katrina Boldry, who's going to be talking all about harnesses, mobility harnesses, different types of harnesses for service dog. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the shop?
Sure. So at Bold Leads, we handcraft a lot of different kinds of dog equipment, leashes, collars, and harnesses. I have a specialty niche doing service dog equipment. So I've been making mobility type balance harnesses for over 15 years now. And so we also do a lot of other types of gear that's not service dog specific, but this is where my passion is.
I love that. And I've been using especially your leashes for literally a decade now, like for so long. I love them so much.
So you want to know a little more about handles.
Yeah.
So we have lots of options available for service dog harnesses, and it depends on what type of work you want the dog to be doing. How will the dog be assisting you? And that's where we match the harness handle with the person and the dog, of course. So there's a few different options here. This one is set up for a semi-rigid balance handle, and that is vertical, so for counterbalance. We do have the rigid metal handles as well, which are good for when somebody needs a really firm handle and occasional bracing. And then this one has a second option of having a pull strap on it. So this is often used for momentum pulling or just walking along with the dog where the dog's mass is doing the work of assisting someone. So all the softer handles, soft to semi-rigid, are really working with the dog's mass, okay? So kind of the counterweight, so the dog is not providing active pressure, but leaning a bit away from it.
Okay.
Okay.
So counterbalance.
Counterbalance or momentum pulling. Yeah. So when we're talking about the rigid metal handles, we want to be very aware, very aware and very conscious of how it's being used. My personal opinion, and I've been saying this for years, is that a lot of people think they need a rigid handle, but they really don't. Really, in most cases, either like a momentum pull or a counterbalance handle is going to provide them, believe it or not, more support than the rigid handle. However, there are people that absolutely need a rigid handle, and it's not because they're putting weight on it while they're in motion. They're really just, their hand is resting on it, and that gives them that sense of anchoring, okay? And that's very individual to the person and their disability and how their dog works. So this handle can do bracing. We're not a big fan. We're going to try to do everything but bracing in most cases, but there are occasions where it is appropriate, right? If done correctly. And by correctly, we mean that especially for any kind of brace test where you're adding any kind of pressure to the dog, any kind of pushing either down or never forward, by the way, just a little bit of weight downwards, the dog should always be standing, steady, and square, okay? And prepared, cued for the pressure that they're going to have because they need to learn how to use their muscles with that handle, okay? And I think that's where it sometimes gets a little controversial, is a lot of people just aren't aware of the nuance and the appropriateness of how to do it. And also, you can't judge from a single photo or a little tiny video clip because you're not seeing the context.
Yeah.
But I just like to point out that we're very often better served with the flexible handle. And, I can demonstrate that. Do you want to see how that works?
Yeah.
All right, let me move her out of the way a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to kind of anchor this down with my hands. Okay, so take a hold of that metal handle and just kind of move it around, move it back and forth. All right, can you see how it's moving the whole harness? Okay, now do that same thing with that flexible handle. Can you see that? All right,
Better for the dog.
it's much better for the dog because the flexible handle is absorbing that excess movement and not transferring it directly into the dog's skeletal structure, okay? What we're not showing here in terms of handles is like a guide dog handle, which would be the rigid, long handle for the dog leading. It's a step and a half in front, okay? It's a little different than if you're having the dog do support tasks. So we're just going to talk about the support and the mobility type.
Perfect.
type tasks.
And hey y'all, if you're enjoying this video and getting value from this video, I would love it if you could head on down and boop that like button. Doing so positively reinforces us for doing these videos and lets me know that you want more of them.
So we get a lot of questions from potential clients even, that how do I prepare my dog? When do I know if my dog is ready to start mobility work? Rule number one, the dog needs to be mature. And by mature, we're not talking about full grown, okay? So often, just your general practice veterinarian will say, oh, he's full grown at around, I don't know, 12 months, 14 months, maybe. It depends on the vet and what they're talking, and what the breed is and everything. But what they mean by that, by full grown, is the dog has reached most of their final height, but they are definitely not mature yet, okay? So physical maturity happens considerably later. And when we're talking about large breed dogs, this is going to be closer to 2 years old. And this recommendation we are pulling from working dog veterinarians. And these working dog veterinarians know working dogs like search and rescue, canine, military. So those dogs are doing really high impact, really hard work. Okay, like for example, one of the things the working dog groups recommend is no hitting the concrete, no jumping out of the back of the SUV and hitting concrete before they're physically mature. Because why?
Because it's going to hurt their own.
Right, because
The
it's
impact is
jarring.
significant.
Yeah, the impact is significant of them landing on their front feet repetitively.
Over and over.
So the key here is repetitive. All right, so 1 or 2 incidents,
Yeah.
it's all good.
Yeah.
So, but what we want to avoid when we are raising and training a service dog is we don't want to set them up for any kind of repetitive motion or
Concussive,
impact
yeah.
injury.
Yeah.
Okay. The more often it's done, the more likely it is to cause problems. Okay. And that means it could be just like tiny little strains that you don't really see right away. But what happens is that can trigger osteoarthritis in the future. Okay. So the reason we need the dog to be fully mature, and this is we're going to be talking close to 2 years, minimum of 18 months. I don't care what the breed is. Minimum of 18 months is always my recommendation. If you'd like to see a very fleshed out, comprehensive list and explanation of these recommendations, I have collected a lot of information and resources and studies and research and put it on my Mobility Dog group, Mobility Dog Resource Group. Our website is mobilitydogresources.org. So this is a completely free educational resource for anyone who wants to know more about mobility dogs. And by mobility, we're talking, again, about the more physical support.
Not retrieves, but
Correct. Yeah, I know the word mobility can be used a lot of different ways, but Mobility Dog Resource Group specifically deals with the balance and support type service dogs. So now that your dog has reached their full maturity, all right, and this is going to be according to your veterinarian, and I highly recommend working with specialists. And the reason for that is general practice veterinarians, no shade at all. I love you guys. You do amazing work. However, they don't have the in-depth training simply because they just haven't had the additional training to know the specific specialty of working dogs. Okay, so if you want to get a little bit closer, start looking for a veterinarian that does like orthopedic and rehab type work. Okay, that kind of department. They have the knowledge to assess movement and structure, which is very different in a service dog than it is in a pet dog. And one of the reasons is because the way the dogs pivot. It's fascinating. Anyway, the dogs pivot more. Our pet dogs don't have to do that, right? So they're moving differently. So we want to make sure we're looking at their whole body. Okay. So the next step, we want the dog to be cleared for this type of
more
heavy work, right? Okay. So this is physically demanding work. All right. So we want to clear that dog with a knowledgeable veterinarian, and that's going to mean X-rays. So radiographs of the pelvis in particular, pen hip, or OFA are good places to start. Those two tests measure very different things. So talk with your veterinarian about which is going to be the best one for you and your dog. And one can be done earlier in their dog's life than the other, but I'll stay out of that because that's when you need a professional to advise you. So in addition to the hips, we want to make sure that they have good shoulders and elbows, okay? Because most of a dog's weight is on their front end. All right, so their normal gait, 60% is on the front end of the dog and only 40% is on the back end of the dog. Okay, this is just as they're normally walking. The other joints to handle that are going to be toward the front. So we're going to look at shoulders, spine, elbows. Now, tendons don't show on x-rays. So some veterinarians might recommend you do like ultrasound scans because we want to make sure that there's not already damage or injury or structural problems. Okay. So now that you have a good mobility candidate that's been cleared by your veterinarian for work, don't just go sticking a harness on your dog and pulling him around, right? We don't want to see that. We want to see the dog well prepared and trained before the harness ever goes on. Okay. And this training starts when they're little. Now, we're not talking about any kind of physical pressure, but we're talking about like how to position and pivot at the person's side, how to stay where the person will need the dog to be working. Okay, and it's different depending on the task. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so it's like one of the last things you do when training a service dog for mobility work is put the harness on. All right, literally everything else comes first. The groundwork, the foundation, right? And it's the same foundation for almost all service dogs, right? But when the dog is a little older, we can start doing some simple like counterbalance exercises. Like if you held your hand up, I push on your hand, what do?
Push back.
You brace against it, right? And that's just very gentle. This is just a few ounces of pressure. And so we can teach the dog how to respond to that. Recommended to find somebody who knows how to train mobility and that can help you set up a training plan just to keep you on target, right? Because we don't want to skip ahead too many steps. Yeah. All right, so once the dog has a good foundation, understands wearing the harness means we're working and all that good stuff, then we can start to use the handles a little bit, all right? And so what we're gonna ask the dog to do is do some, like if I pull up, the dog kind of counterbalances that and they start to learn to use their muscles, right? So they're engaging in that pressure. That's not just happening to them, they're engaging with it. And one other key component for a dog doing mobility work, because it is such a physically demanding job, is that the dog be in really good shape, good fitness, good and strong, lean body weight, really important. Just even a little bit overweight, being a little bit overweight can take 2 years off of a dog's lifespan.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
They already don't live long enough, right? 2 years is a lot. Yeah. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we keep our dog healthy and sound and go with those veterinarian recommendations because there might be continuous screening, every couple of years that the vet might recommend as well. So I want to give you a brief introduction to how a harness should fit, which includes a little bit of dog anatomy. You can see where this handle and girth lines up. All right, we call this the girth line. This is just behind the dog's withers. And then this is their shoulder blade where this blue tape is. The point of the shoulder is right here. So this has a lot of movement in it, all right? And it pivots. There's a second piece of tape up here somewhere. Anyway, the shoulder blade pivots about here as this shoulder point moves with the dog's legs, all right? And then on the front, of course, is the point of the sternum. All right, so the sternum bone that goes from the breastbone down to under the ribs, it connects the ribs under the center of the dog. That's the strongest part of their body. And the center of their mass is right about here. So if you were to take the girth line and then line it up with breastbone right about here is going to be the dog's center of mass. Why is this center of mass so important? Well, the mobility dogs are going to be using their body to assist, right? So anytime we can get the closest to their center of mass, their center of gravity, means the dog does less work to affect the handle pressure. The closer we get it here, so you're using the dog's mass instead of muscling, okay? And different harnesses are designed to do different things as well, and that's where the handle discussion will come in. But anytime we can anchor a handle closer to that center of mass, you're going to have more stability and lower impact on the dog. The important landmarks are going to be the withers. So the top of the shoulder blade right here, this blue tape is representing that, all right? So it's under the harness, but the top of this shoulder blade is right about here on this dog, and this is called the withers, all right? So this is where the top of those shoulder blades come together and they move a little bit, right? They move a little like this as the dog walks. And then right behind the withers is where we're gonna find that girth line. And if we go straight down, that's going to be under the strongest part of their ribs. Okay. So a good harness directs pressure into the dog's bone structure, not just pressure onto muscles And we especially want to make sure we're keeping tendons and joints free of direct pressure. Okay, now let's take a look at a real dog and see how these joints move. And that'll give you an idea of how all these puzzle pieces will fit together. So now let's show those same landmarks on a real dog. All right, so this is the top of his shoulder blade. His shoulder blade is right here. It's kind of a teardrop shaped thing. And it comes down to right here. This is the front of his, the point of his shoulder. Foot, there we go. And you can see how much this needs to move, all right? So we don't want to strap that in because it will be restrictive. And then the front of his chest is covered by a lot of floof, but right about here is the front of his sternum. And then you can also kind of feel both his shoulder points and his sternum on the front. And then from the top, just behind the withers, is going to be that girth line. This is exactly where a saddle on a horse sits, okay? So it's staying off of these moving shoulder joints. If there's any pressure, it's behind these shoulder joints so it doesn't pinch all those tendons as they are moving. And then we want to make sure we can stay well clear of the spine, okay? Because there's nothing supporting this area of the dog, all right? Even down here, so these ribs, these rear ribs, like the last 3 or 4, don't connect to the sternum bone, all right? So these are really soft, all right? They're protecting organs, but not a real structural thing. So if we put any like girth straps, we want to make sure it's under the dog's ribs here, okay? Maybe a little bit back here, but not so far back it's where these ribs are not attached. We want to leave that clear. Okay, so now with the harness on, Jess, good job. So this is my light assistance harness, and it's designed to be as minimal as possible, single handle for either counterbalance or leading. But this shoulder blade, I'm just going to trace it with my fingers, is right here. So as we move this leg, you can see how it has complete freedom of motion, all right? So of course we have to bring a strap across the top here, but this part of the bone doesn't move very much. And then again, the handle is positioned directly around that center line, that girth line. And then his breastbone, good boy, his breastbone is right here. And so breast collars or chest straps or whatever you want to call them should sit on or above that sternum, that point of sternum there. This particular one is curved to curve up over that shoulder joint to keep as much freedom of motion as we can. Now let's show different kind of handles and how they work. But in order to do that, I also need to explain the position between the human and the dog, because it's different than just walking a dog on a heel, right? Put him in like a heel, like a proper competition heel, okay, right? Now, can you see that her shoulder and pelvis in that position is...
I'll just feed him while you're...
Just feed him.
Okay.
There we go. So in a formal heel position, like for competition obedience, I want you to notice that her body is aligned with his head, all right? He's way back here. His center of grass is way back here. He can't do a lot of work from back here. And if you did, it would be kind of a weird pushing and shoving action. We don't want to do that. Okay, so now if you take us a little bit of a step back, so we can now draw a line from her shoulder through her pelvis down to the dog's girth line, okay? This is where you're going to get the most counterbalance support, okay? So counterbalance is going to be when you're kind of pulling up and then leaning away. Go ahead and pull. See what he does. See, he's going to reposition himself to brace that. Okay, and then yeah, pull away from him. Brace. Good job. Good job.
Good job, bud.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about these other 2 kinds of handles. Dalton, back. There we go. Good job. If you needed to stop and steady yourself with the rigid handle, you're going to want that in line with your pelvis and your shoulder, okay? So again, so you're aligned. I like to give the example of a stair rail when talking about the rigid handles. All right, so think about how you use a stair rail. Do you grab and push on it? No, you don't. In fact, you almost kind of lift and pull, right? So if you're pulling yourself up, you very gently lift and pull, but it's mostly there for guidance, okay? You don't need to put all your weight on it. So the dog's job in this situation is going to be to help you maintain your balance, but you have to do the work, okay? So you're not going to rely on the dog for holding you upright. You're only going to rely on the dog to keep you steady, all right? So maintain steadiness. So if you were to get a little wobbly, go ahead and take that handle, and you can feel how sturdy that is. You can almost like feel the ground through the dog, okay? That's its purpose. And you don't need to put hardly any pressure on
there's
it.
no pressure.
It's just resting your hand, very similar to how you might use a stair rail. Okay, so when you're using a stair rail, you're not really leaning on it, right? You're almost just kind of gently following it.
Yep.
That's how to use a mobility handle correctly.
But when they're stationary.
Some people can do it. If they're very aware of where their hand is, you can rest your hand lightly on the handle as the dog is walking. But if there's any change in pressure, the dog needs to stop and brace and be ready for it. Okay, so if you get wobbly, you cue him to stop. And then go ahead and take that other handle. So that one is positioned, I'm going to bring him forward a little bit, there we go. That one is positioned for forward momentum. It's not quite long enough for guide work. So if this was a traditional guide dog, yes, you want your hand still in line with your pelvis, but you want your handle to be almost a little closer to the dog's pelvis, right? Because in that case, you need to make a really stable triangle. For leading or momentum pulling type work, it's somewhere in between the counterbalance and the guide handle, okay? It's a little different for everybody. Part of it just depends on how you move and how your dog moves. This handle will be too long for me, but it looks about right for you, okay? And now as he's leading you, you're gonna stay in that aligned position, all right? You don't want your dog pulling you out of physical alignment because that is going to be bad for your body, right? Go ahead and pull on that handle. Good job. Good brace. There it is. Yep, he braced into it.
Yeah.
That's good. So you got some tension there.
Yeah.
So as you're moving forward, that gravity is going to shift forward a little bit. Okay. You're not going to put your hand all the way out here, but it's going to just naturally kind of come. Yeah, right about there. You saw it. Where'd you go? I fell down on the baiting dog. All right, here's the bait. So go ahead and pull again. And if you were walking, you would feel that shift forward just a little bit. So what's really happening here is we're putting any of that pulling pressure at the center of the dog's mass, which means the dog does not have to do much of anything to exert that support, okay? Because it's just his gravity is doing the work. And then we also want to train them to respond to changes in pressure, okay? So if they feel you wobble or they feel you grab the handle tighter because you're about to lose your balance, that's what we're going to want to teach the dog to respond to, okay? But those positions,
Where you go, bud?
those positions can be trained without a harness.
Yeah.
In fact, you can do that with a puppy, right? The same way you would train heeling, you would just reward it at a different location.
Yep.
Okay. That's a good boy. That's a good boy.
He's so sweet.
Help to and from a seated position is a really important task to a lot of people, okay? And we're going to do this without bracing. We're going to do this without pushing or adding any weight to the dog.
Yeah.
So you notice we changed out the handle. If this is your important task, that's going to be your primary handle, right? That's what you're going to set as your primary. It's shorter because remember, the closer we can, so go ahead and grab as if you're pulling. The closer we can keep this to this, so the hand to the center, is going to give you the most support and bang for your buck, all right? Because it's really on the dog's center of mass. So if you need to stand up, we're going to have him step forward, and you're going to let him give you a little bit of an oomph. Okay, ready? Step forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hardly any pressure on that,
no,
right? You
yeah.
didn't need much.
Yeah.
But once you get on your feet, if you need to rearrange your feet,
Yeah.
then go ahead and put your hand on this one just to show an appropriate way to balance that. Okay.
Forward.
There you go. Good. And if you were wobbly right there, exactly. There you go. And see, he's moving because I'm baiting him, but normally he wouldn't be moving right now. Right. Okay. So the handles are a connection to the dog. All right. So they're really serving as a communication point as well as a support point. So training how to respond to those different types of task situations is important because they will learn it's okay to pull into this. It's not okay to pull into this. Now, I'm not a professional trainer. However, I know what it looks like when it's done well. One of my favorite tips is as you start training a dog with the handles, if the dog decides to go ahead and pull or lunge or inappropriately pull into that handle, let go of that handle because you don't want to teach the dog that was okay. And very often when you let go, they go, "Oh my gosh, I lost you. Where'd you go?" And then they come back to reconnect essentially. Especially during training, use the handles appropriately and don't practice incorrectly. All right, and letting the dog pull when you don't want it, especially in a rigid handle, or any kind of pushing. You never want to push, okay? You never want to push.
Not a steering wheel.
Not a steering wheel. This is not to guide the dog, all right? This is for the human support, all right? This is not to control where the dog is going. That's going to be where your leash and training is going to come in, okay? So if you're in a situation where what's happening with that handle is about to become very questionable, let go. Don't do it. Just stop.
All right, Katrina, thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing. I'm sure the viewers are like, just their mind is blown by how much information that you gave. You're so knowledgeable. So thank you for coming on here.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I love sharing knowledge whenever I can. So.
And a big thank you to Dalton for being our model dog as well. Check out the website that I'm going to be linking down below. And you should probably watch this video next because it's going to be a good one. You all have an awesome day and happy training.